Commander Besak can taste metal, the first sign the air scrubbers are failing. The battery's nearly exhausted, approximately 80 men, and through the periscope, a Soviet destroyer breaking formation, accelerating directly toward his position. He's 12 miles off Vladivostok. 6 hours ago, Besak pushed his intelligence mission to the very edge of Soviet-claimed waters, operating in that gray area where international law blurs and plausible deniability becomes the only shield. The reason isn't in any official log, and the 3 officers who know the full story have never spoken about it, even to their families. That decision just made USS Gudgeon the first American submarine ever hunted to the surface by Soviet depth charges. The sonar operator's hand is shaking as he tracks the destroyer's bearing. Besak has one option left: a blind spot maneuver that exploits what naval intelligence believes is a fatal flaw in Soviet sonar arrays. If the flaw exists, Gudgeon vanishes. If it doesn't, he's steering 80 men into a pre-sighted kill box where the destroyer's entire payload is already aimed. With air turning foul and power fading, he gives the order anyway. What happened over the next 18 minutes forced the Pentagon to seal the mission files for 60 years. But, according to sources familiar with the incident, it's not just the crisis that stayed classified. It's what Gudgeon's sensors recorded during that dive. Data that Soviet naval intelligence reportedly spent 2 decades analyzing, then attempting to replicate, before finally burying the findings deep in their own archives when the implications threatened something far more valuable than one American boat. August 1957. Commander Besak orders Gudgeon to periscope depth at dawn, 12 nautical miles east of Vladivostok. The mission is simple on paper. Photograph Soviet destroyer formations through the Type 8 periscope and monitor Pacific Fleet movements from international waters. The boat creeps forward at 2 knots, periscope mast cutting a thin wake in the gray morning swell. Besak watches 3 Soviet Skory-class destroyers conducting anti-submarine exercises in overlapping search patterns. Each destroyer is equipped with active sonar and racks of depth charges. The navigator confirms Gudgeon's position via celestial fix and marks the 12-mile line on the chart. By American reckoning, they are in international waters. The United States recognizes a 3-mile territorial limit. The Soviets claim 12. Besak orders 2 more photo passes. Over 80 men squeezed into a Tang-class submarine already tight with its standard complement. That's the reality aboard Gudgeon, a boat designed with advanced streamlining where every breath is borrowed and every inch of steel matters. Beneath the crew berths, stacked in dark compartments, sits their lifeline, a 252-cell lead-acid battery bank. Those batteries buy them 48 hours underwater at 2 knots. 48 hours before they must surface, expose themselves, run the diesels to recharge. 48 hours is the absolute limit. Push beyond that, the air turns toxic, the lights die. In this streamlined hull, designed for submerged speed, equipped with a snorkel mask for diesel air intake, becomes nothing more than a steel coffin drifting at the mercy of current and enemy sonar. At the start of the pursuit, battery reserves remained high, but they would soon plummet. Besak acknowledges the report without hesitation. He's operated on tighter margins before. The sonar operator reported multiple surface contacts as Soviet vessels converged on their position. High-speed screws, active sonar pinging. Besak steps to the sonar console and listens. The sound is unmistakable. Soviet destroyers sweeping in overlapping search patterns, a training exercise designed to flush submarines from shallow water. Multiple Soviet destroyers were tracked by sonar, maintaining a coordinated search formation. The Gudgeon initially attempted to evade by positioning itself away from the primary search axes. Besak calculates the geometry. As long as the boat remains at periscope depth and holds position, the Soviet formations will pass to the north. He orders the crew to maintain silent routine and prepare for a 3rd photo pass. The navigator confirms their position on the chart. 12 miles. International waters. No reason to abort. One Soviet destroyer breaks formation. The sonar operator hears the change immediately. high-speed screws accelerating, bearing shifting from 270 degrees to 285 degrees, directly toward Gudgeon. Active sonar pinging intensifies, sweeping across the boat's position every 12 seconds. Besak raises the periscope for a final visual confirmation. The destroyer is turning hard, bow wave rising, accelerating to flank speed. They have been detected. Either the periscope wake or the snorkel exhaust gave them away. Besak snaps the periscope down and barks the order. Crash dive to 350 feet. Rig for depth charge, silent running. The dive alarm sounds. The boat tilts forward, and 80 men brace against bulkheads as Gudgeon drops into the dark. Silent running means every non-essential system shuts down. Ventilation fans stop. Galley secured. Crew ordered to lie flat in their racks or sit motionless on the deck. Even footsteps can betray position to a destroyer's sonar. Besak holds Gudgeon at 350 feet and reduces speed to 2 knots, the minimum needed to maintain steerage. The boat glides through the thermocline, a temperature boundary that bends sonar waves and creates acoustic shadows. According to crew accounts, battery reserves were reported at nearly 80%. At 2 knots, that gives them an estimated 36 hours of submerged endurance. But any increase in speed to evade cuts that time in half. Besak understands the equation. Gudgeon cannot outrun a destroyer. While the Tang class was designed for significantly improved underwater performance over earlier fleet boats, she still cannot match a destroyer's surface speed of 32 knots. Gudgeon is now blind and mute. Submerged below periscope depth, the boat cannot receive or transmit radio signals. No contact with Pearl Harbor. No orders. No rescue coordination. The radio officer secures the transmitter and logs the last known position. Besak is on his own. Doctrine is clear. Evade at depth, maintain stealth, surface only when the threat is clear or survival is at stake. But Doctrine was written for short engagements, not a patient Soviet destroyer with time and depth charges to spare. The sonar operator tracks the destroyer circling overhead, screws reverberating through the hull. Besak calculates time and distance. If the Soviets maintain this search pattern, Gudgeon can creep east at 2 knots and slip out of the net by dawn. If they escalate, the battery will not last. The fundamental problem is simple. Gudgeon cannot outrun the destroyer, cannot recharge batteries without surfacing, cannot communicate for orders while submerged, and cannot remain submerged indefinitely. Every hour at 2 knots drains 2% of the battery reserve. Every evasive maneuver at higher speed drains double that. The chief engineer runs the numbers for Besak. At current drain rate, they have 34 hours before reserves drop to 20%, the threshold below which they must reserve power for emergency blow and life support. After that, the boat has perhaps 4 hours before carbon dioxide buildup incapacitates the crew. Besak listens, nods, and asks one question. How long can they sustain 4 knots if they need to sprint? The engineer answers, 6 hours. Then the batteries are dead. 30 minutes after the dive, the sonar operator hears splashes on the surface directly above. Moments later, the first depth charge detonates. 200 feet depth, several hundred yards astern. The shockwave slams through the hull like a hammer blow. The lights flicker. 2 men in the forward torpedo room are thrown off their feet. Besak grips the periscope stand and waits for the hull to settle. No leaks, no alarms. The charge was shallow and distant, a ranging shot. The Soviets are establishing the search box. He orders all hands to rig for depth charge, secure loose gear, shut watertight doors, and brace for impact. The crew moves silently, efficiently. They have drilled for this. Now they find out if the drills were enough. Besak holds Gudgeon at 350 feet. Although the Tang class was designed for a test depth of 700 feet, Gudgeon's operational depth during this mission was severely restricted by a mechanical failure. Going deeper risks collapse. Staying shallow risks a direct hit. The crew lies flat, breathing slowly to conserve oxygen and reduce noise. Sonar operator tracks the destroyer circling overhead, screws churning at 20 knots. The Soviet ship is methodical, patient. Every pass drops another charge. Subsequent detonations come at varying intervals as the Soviet destroyers refine their sonar track. The hull groans. The intensity of the pressure and the concussions from the charges reportedly cause minor damage throughout the boat. Besak does not flinch. He is operating with a very thin margin of safety given the boat's mechanical limitations. He intends to use every foot if necessary. Another depth charge detonates deep below, reportedly around 250 feet, several hundred yards astern. The Soviet destroyer is walking the pattern deeper and tighter, a textbook anti-submarine tactic. Each charge establishes a new datum point, narrowing the search box and forcing the submarine either up into a shallower kill zone or down past crush depth. Besak listens to the sonar reports and tracks the geometry on the chart. The Soviets are not guessing. They have refined Gudgeon's position to within a 500-yard radius and are systematically collapsing that radius with each salvo. The next charge will likely detonate at 300 feet or deeper. If it lands within 100 yards, the blast wave may rupture seals, crack pipes, or blow a ballast tank. If it lands within 50 feet, the shock will implode the hull. Besak calculates the dilemma aloud to his executive officer.
The Tang-class Gudgeon could dive far deeper than older fleet boats, but at extreme depth, any submarine risks catastrophic failure. At their current depth of 350 feet, the next salvo may land within lethal blast radius. If they surface, they hand the Soviets a propaganda victory and risk court-martial for creating an international incident without authorization.
The executive officer asks if they can outrun the pattern. Besak shakes his head. At 4 knots, Gudgeon can move 1 nautical mile in 15 minutes. Based on standard anti-submarine tactics of the era, the destroyer could likely reposition and drop a new pattern in approximately 8 minutes. The battery math does not allow sustained high-speed evasion. The only option is to sit quiet, ride out the barrage, and hope the Soviets exhaust their depth charge magazine before the hull gives out or the batteries die. A depth charge is a steel drum packed with 200 to 300 pounds of TNT, preset to detonate at a specific depth via hydrostatic fuse. When the charge reaches the set depth, water pressure closes an electrical circuit and triggers detonation. The explosion creates a gas bubble that expands and contracts violently, generating a shock wave traveling at 5,000 feet per second through seawater. Water is 800 times denser than air, so the shock wave does not dissipate quickly. It reflects off the seafloor, the surface, and the submarine's hull, creating multiple pressure pulses that can crack welds, rupture seals, and shatter equipment even at distances beyond direct blast range. A charge detonating within 50 feet will crush the pressure hull. A charge at 100 feet will disable machinery. A charge at 200 feet will shake the crew and test every weld. Gudgeon's pressure hull is high tensile steel, engineered to withstand enormous force, roughly 14.7 pounds per square inch for every foot of depth. At her operational limits, hundreds of pounds per square inch crush inward from every direction. Inside, a crewman hears it. A low groan as the steel bends inward. It's elastic deformation. The hull flexes, then snaps back when they surface. But there's a line they can't see. Cross it, and the steel starts bending permanently. Plastic deformation. The structure weakens. And once that starts, collapse accelerates. The entire pressure hull can implode in under 1 second. Thousands of tons of seawater pressure, collapsing inward so violently it creates a shock wave, audible on sonar 50 miles away. There is no warning, no time to react. One moment the crew is breathing, the next, they are gone. Tang-class submarines like Gudgeon carried a doubled battery capacity, 504 lead-acid cells in 4 banks, delivering roughly 10,000 amp-hours at full charge. Each cell is a sealed box filled with lead plates submerged in sulfuric acid. When the boat draws current, the lead and lead oxide on the plates are converted into lead sulfate, releasing electrons. Silent running at 2 knots draws approximately 200 amps per hour, giving a theoretical endurance well beyond 24 hours. But the final 20% of capacity is reserved for emergency blow and life support. An emergency blow utilizes high-pressure air stored in dedicated flasks, a pneumatic system that functions even without electrical power. Life support requires ventilation fans and carbon dioxide scrubbers. Cut into that reserve, and the boat loses the ability to surface or breathe. Under standard conditions, practical submerged endurance was roughly 20 hours before air and power reached. Critical levels. After that, the crew faces a choice: surface or suffocate. Passive sonar detects sound waves radiating from surface ships and submarines. Gudgeon's bow-mounted sonar array, a ring of sensors designed to pick up propeller noise, engine vibration, and hull resonance, forms her primary listening system. But the array has a 30-degree blind cone directly astern, where the boat's own hull and machinery mask incoming noise. To hear a contact approaching from behind, the operator must either turn the boat to bring the contact into the forward arc, or go active with a sonar ping, betraying Gudgeon's position. Turning the boat means increasing speed and draining the battery. Going active means the Soviets get an exact range and bearing. Staying blind means the next depth charge could detonate without warning. The sonar operator has no good option. He listens, calls out every bearing shift, and prays the destroyer stays in the forward arc. After 12 hours submerged, Gudgeon's dead reckoning position drifts 2 nautical miles from the true position. Dead reckoning relies on gyro compass heading and speed estimates integrated over time. But ocean currents push the boat off course at rates that vary with depth and season. The gyro compass precesses, drifting a fraction of a degree per hour. Speed estimates are based on propeller RPM, which do not account for current assistance or resistance. The navigator cannot take a celestial fix without surfacing. He cannot receive radio navigation signals below periscope depth. His best estimate is a circle of uncertainty 2 miles in radius and growing. If the drift runs westward, Gudgeon may have crossed into Soviet territorial waters. A boundary Moscow claims extends 12 miles from shore, though Washington recognizes only 3. Under Soviet maritime doctrine, such an incursion could provide justification for lethal force. If the drift runs eastward, they remain in what the United States considers international waters. The navigator does not know which. Neither does Besak. The siege continues into its middle stages. The chief engineer reports battery reserves approaching critical levels, hovering near 30% and falling. Life support and propulsion now compete for the same shrinking amp-hour budget. Ventilation fans draw current. Carbon dioxide scrubbers draw current. Electric trim pumps that adjust ballast draw current. According to crew accounts, the boat has limited hours of submerged time before carbon dioxide accumulation incapacitates the crew. Already the air tastes metallic, a sign the scrubbers are saturating. Crew members breathe slowly, conserving oxygen and reducing metabolic load. Some lie motionless in their racks, eyes open, listening to the destroyer circling overhead. Besak checks the gauge. The numbers tell a grim story. He does the arithmetic again, hoping they will change. They do not. The Soviet destroyer drops a new salvo, 4 charges detonating in a square pattern. The sonar operator calls out detonation depth: 380 feet, 32 feet below Gudgeon's position. Close enough that the shockwave cracks a gauge glass in the control room and trips a breaker in the forward battery compartment. The lights flicker. An electrician scrambles to reset the breaker before the battery section goes offline. Besak grips the periscope stand as the hull shudders. The Soviets are no longer ranging. They are inside lethal radius. The next salvo may detonate within 50 feet. If that happens, the pressure hull will rupture, Seawater will flood the compartments, and at that depth, a catastrophic breach would leave the crew with only minutes to survive. 80 men. Minutes. Besic orders the executive officer to prepare emergency blow procedures. The sonar operator reports he has lost contact on the destroyer. The screws are no longer audible in the forward arc. The destroyer may have maneuvered into the blind cone directly astern. Besic understands what that means. The next depth charge could detonate within lethal range with no warning. The operator cannot turn the boat to regain contact without increasing speed and draining the battery further. He cannot go active without revealing Gudgeon's exact position. He can only listen and hope the destroyer moves back into the forward arc before the next salvo drops. Besic orders the crew to brace for impact. The sonar operator presses the headphones tighter, straining to hear any shift in bearing. In what feels like an eternity, contact remains lost. The silence is worse than the explosions. The navigator reports dead reckoning drift has accumulated to approximately 4 nautical miles over 18 hours. If the drift error runs eastward, Gudgeon is still in international waters. If it runs westward, the boat may have crossed into Soviet territorial space. The 12-mile limit is now a fuzzy boundary, a line the navigator cannot verify without surfacing for a celestial fix or radio navigation signal. Besic studies the chart. 4 nautical miles of uncertainty. Besic asks the navigator for his best estimate. According to accounts of the incident, the navigator hesitates, then answers. 60% confidence they remain outside Soviet waters. 60%. Besic nods. Not good enough for a legal defense, but good enough to justify surfacing if survival demands it. He marks the estimated position on the chart and prepares to make the final call. Besic faces the final calculation. Surface now in what he believes is international water and accept diplomatic fallout, or stay down another 4 to 6 hours gambling that batteries hold, the hull holds, and the Soviets exhaust their depth charge magazine first. The chief engineer stands by with the battery report. The sonar operator listens for the destroyer. The navigator rechecks the drift estimate. Besic weighs the variables. If he surfaces and the navigator's estimate is wrong, Gudgeon crossed into Soviet waters, and the crew faces court-martial for violating territorial sovereignty. If he stays down and the batteries fail, the crew suffocates. If he stays down and the next salvo lands close, the hull implodes. 3 outcomes, 2 of them fatal. He has commanded submarines for 12 years. He has never faced a choice this narrow. He looks at the depth gauge, the battery gauge, the chart. Then he makes the call. Hour 30, pre-dawn. Besic orders emergency blow. Compressed air roars into the ballast tanks, forcing seawater out through the flood ports. Gudgeon's bow tilts up 40 degrees. The crew grabs handholds as the boat rockets toward the surface at a rate approaching 10 feet per second. 45 seconds later, Gudgeon breaches the surface within 800 yards of the Soviet destroyer. Water cascades off the sail. Besic climbs to the bridge and scans the horizon. The destroyer is turning hard, accelerating toward them. Deck guns and torpedo tubes train on the sail. The navigator confirms their position. 13.1 nautical miles from Vladivostok. International waters, legal. Besic orders the diesel started and the battery charged. The crew breathes fresh air for the first time in 30 hours. The Soviet warship closes to 400 yards and holds position, guns trained. The Soviet destroyer circles Gudgeon with deck guns and torpedo tubes trained on the sail. Besic stands on the bridge watching the warship maneuver. Neither side fires, neither side speaks. After 20 minutes, the Soviet ship signals in international code. Leave area immediately. Besic acknowledges with a single flag hoist. The destroyer withdraws to 1,000 yards and holds position, watching. Gudgeon runs on the surface under diesel power, main engines driving the propellers and generators recharging the battery bank. The crew secures equipment, repairs the cracked gauge, and resets the breaker. 6 hours later, with batteries at 60%, Besic orders the boat to dive and transit east out of the patrol zone. The Soviet destroyer does not follow. the engagement is over. Following the incident, Gudgeon proceeded to Yokosuka, Japan, before continuing its historic 8-month circumnavigation, eventually returning to Pearl Harbor in February 1958. The boat is met by a security cordon. Intelligence officers board before the crew disembarks. All patrol logs, navigation charts, and photographic film are confiscated. Crew members are debriefed individually and ordered not to discuss the patrol with anyone, including family. Commander Basak submits a classified after-action report that circulates only within the submarine force and Pacific Fleet intelligence. The official record lists the patrol as routine surveillance, with no significant contact. No mention of depth charges, no mention of forced surfacing, no mention of the 30-hour siege. The incident is sealed under operational security protocols. For the crew, it is as if the engagement never happened. 6 weeks later, Commander Basak and 14 crew members received Navy Commendation Medals in a closed ceremony with no written citation. The medals are presented by the Pacific Fleet Submarine Commander. No families attend, no photographs are taken, no press release is issued. The citations are classified and filed in secure archives. The awards recognize exceptional performance under combat conditions, but the specific actions remain unspecified. For the recipients, the medals are a silent acknowledgement. The Navy knows what happened, values what they did, and will never speak of it publicly. The crew returns to routine patrols. The incident remains classified for 40 years. The patrol report circulates internally and rewrites U.S. submarine doctrine. Battery endurance, not sonar or speed, is now recognized as the binding constraint in anti-submarine evasion. Diesel-electric boats operating in contested waters are instructed to prioritize battery conservation over aggressive surveillance. The lessons from Gudgeon inform U.S. submarine operations during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, when Soviet diesel boats face identical battery and depth charge pressure from American destroyers. The incident also accelerates the Navy's transition to nuclear-powered attack submarines that eliminate the diesel-electric endurance problem entirely. USS Gudgeon continues Cold War patrols until decommissioning in 1983. Commander Basak retires with the rank of captain. The full story remains classified until partial declassification in the 1990s. The first American submarine forced to surface by enemy action. A classified humiliation that reshaped underwater warfare.